everyone, and welcome to this very first episode of DevShow in 2021. I hope you all enjoyed the vacation or staycation and got back here fully recharged. I personally enjoyed it, and today I am your host together with my good colleague Rasmus Jack. And by the way, my name is Sherry List. So Rasmus, how are you doing today? How was your vacation?
So yeah, thanks, Sherry, and welcome back, everybody. My holidays was good. I mean, as good as it can be in these quiet days with the family and three kids, and quiet as it can be with three kids and a lot of present Christmas Eve and New Year's. But it was good. I can't complain. What about yourself, Sherry?
Well, it was very relaxing. I literally finished all the Christmas movies or romantic comedy movies on all the possible streaming platform that you can imagine. Even the one from my supermarket, the one that provides. Did you know they provide also streaming? So
Actually, not. No.
yeah, so because I buy everything online these days, so Coop provided me some credit to a platform called See More. And it has a lot of new
Cool.
movies. So yeah, I finished
So
all.
all your greeting cards came from all the streaming platforms around the world. That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. So yes. Now we are back, and we are going to have this 21st episode of our show. What do we have on the agenda today?
Yeah. So maybe some of you have already seen the title of the session, and based on that, I think we're gonna learn a bit about data today. So the title is data, and more data in Azure. And the speaker today is essentially asking two questions in the session. So why is inserting data in Azure slow? Azure SQL slow, sorry, and how do I place a file in Azure Blob storage and get database to view on it? So that's basically what we're gonna see today, as we have been promised. So and we have today we have a very good speaker. So we have Morne. Morne is one of the cloud solution architects that I work with in the Danish Microsoft office. And yeah, we just spoke about it before here, Morne. You have been a developer for 12 years. And so you're actually a developer turned into a data guy. And you're originally from South Africa. We have also had some talks about that before. And then you move to Denmark, and this is our favorite topic, actually, when people move to Denmark, and favorite question, why do Denmark?
Yeah.
So I can answer it for you. I already know. I mean, right?
Yeah, I moved for the weather.
Right? Same here.
Yeah, definitely. Like Sherry and like.
I mean, the thing is, living in a country where in high summer, like it's right now, not where I am, obviously, but in South Africa, it's a high summer. It is about in the 40 degrees. And I have the saying where you can, when it's hot, there's only so much of clothes you can take off before the police show up, right? When it's colder, you can just put more clothes on. And that kind of clinched it for me. I love this gray weather. I love having clouds all of the time. I love rain. It makes me happy. So it's always funny at the office when people go, "Oh man, I'm so sick of this gray weather," and I'm going like, "This is freaking awesome. It's been going for 2 weeks. What's wrong with you?"
I love it, Morne. Love it, Morne. And by the way, welcome to DevShow. It's a pleasure to have you here. And
thank you very much
for your talk. You also state yourself as a world traveler, and you forgot to buy the T-shirt. So what do you mean about that?
I do. I was a premier field engineer, which meant I traveled a lot, right? I've seen a lot, traveled a lot. I actually have magnets on my fridge from a lot of places I've been. And one of the things though is if you travel that much for work, you get sick of it, right? I mean, I was in Vienna, and the only two places I saw in Vienna was the hotel and the customer, and obviously the airport. Because at some point you just go like, there's another country. I don't want to see your stuff. I'm sick of it, right? I've seen enough Champs-Élysées. I've seen enough of the Eiffel Tower. I don't want to see anything further.
Just want to be in Denmark, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, I remember there was one point in a 2-month period where the longest continuous amount of time I was in Denmark was 28 hours. That gives you enough time to wash your clothes, repack it, sleep, and then get on another plane. I wouldn't suggest it, right? I have like platinum everywhere, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. Yeah. Amazing money. So to just it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And just before we hand over the stage to you, and then Sherry, you have some practicalities that you just want to share with the audience before.
Yes, I wanted to mention you all that doesn't matter from which platform you're watching us, you can actually type your questions, and Morne is going to answer them after the show. So please go ahead and then type and talk to us. But I want to also mention that please familiarize yourself with our code of conduct, which is listed on our main meetup page. But in a very short time, just be kind and mindful. So that's it. And I would say that stage is yours, Morne. So we are all looking forward to watch your presentation.
Yeah, take it away.
Thank you very much. I just want to say it's an honor being here and presenting. Right, I want to talk about Azure SQL Database specifically, and I know I said data, and data. There's a lot of data in Azure, right? But one of the things I see often is bad performance in an Azure SQL Database, and typically I'm the guy that gets called to have a look at this, and I see a lot of stuff, and there's regular patterns, and I just wanted to talk about some of these patterns. So let's start talking about them. Right? What should you do? What shouldn't you do? And then take into account, I was a developer for 12 years, but I haven't been for some time. I have a terrible sense of humor. So when I start making jokes, no one's going to get it, and that's fine. But what I want to point out is just, kind of some thinking patterns when you look at something. One of the things I see very regularly is people would just go and they would say, hey, this database is performing badly, so we're just going to give it more resources, right? So I'm going to scale it up. I've got a 2V core. I'm going to jump it up to a 24V core because I'm getting the performance. And then normally that build comes in for it, and then people aren't that happy, right? And then they go, hey, this database is performing terribly. And when we start looking at it, we scale it back to a 2V core again, and just fix some of the performance issues. Right, so this is kind of what I wanted to aim this at, but I had in the back of my mind that this is a dev show. So I wrote some code. It's a SQL guy writing code. Just don't blame me for it. I'm happy to share the code. I think the code is useless. You would be able to just rewrite most of the code by seeing it. But if you want the code, I'm happy to share. Right, so let's have a look at some of the things that I've seen. And some of the benchmarking that I've done. So I've set up a little PowerPoint presentation. It's not very big. It doesn't have a lot of slides, but let's have a look at it, right? So you're throwing data at your database, and as it normally goes when you're testing in your test environment, you're giving it 1 or 2 or 5 records, and it's performing really well. And then suddenly it goes into production, and now it's going to cope with 10,000 rows coming its way, and it just starts performing terribly. Right, I did a test, and I used a for each loop to insert a record, and you'll see some of the code, right? But I used a for each loop, and that took 15 minutes to insert 10,000 rows on a 10 DTU. Now let's just quickly address the DTU and why I didn't go vCore here. I wanted something that I could scale easily. So if I've got a 10 DTU database and I take it up to 100, that's 10 times as much. Now, also having been mindful of my cost, I don't want to go from a 2V core to a 24V core. I had a look at the price, and this is where I started, right? I started with a 2V core. I look at the price and I was like, that's okay. I can run this for a demo. And then I had a look at the 24v core, and I was like, maybe I couldn't run this for a demo, right? I would have to explain this to my manager. And I switched to the DTU. So it just makes it easier for demoing purposes, right? So I selected a 10 DTU, and then I selected 100 DTU. There's a lot of bigger databases. The 10 DTU is the smallest you can go when it's a standard database. So I didn't select a developer database. I selected a standard database. And you could get a little bit better performance if you selected a premium. So there's basic, standard, and then premium. I probably could have gotten better performance if I used premium edition databasing, but I didn't want to, right? So, I mean, the point of view here is I want to use a 10 DTU database, right? And I want to insert 10,000 rows. How the heck am I going to do that, right? First test for each loop takes 15 minutes to do this, right? And what I do is I throw all 10,000 rows at the database, and I just say, hey, you deal with this, right? That was my second approach. So no for each loop, I just take all of the inserts and I throw it right at the database. Now, the problem here is that it's going to try and work through this, and then it's going to get to a point where my connection time's out, right? And it times out at about 4,000 rows. You'll see I've written some code. And after 4,000 rows, it times out. But now we're sitting in a problem, right? Because I've just thrown 10,000 rows at it, and it's happily chugging along through this 10,000 rows. And then we get to a point where it gets an error. It's say, hey, I timed out. But it's already written 4,000 rows. Okay, so what do I do now? How do I handle this, right? Because I have 6,000 more rows, but now I don't know how many rows did go through, which row went through, which one didn't, because there's no guarantee that if I throw them at the database like that, that it's going to be in order, right? So now I'm sitting with this inconsistent database. The rest of my colleagues hate me because now I've got to fix a database that's sitting in production, right? And this is problematic as well, right? Now, I switched to 100 DTU database, and you'll see I threw 100,000 rows at it, right? The for each loop took about 10 minutes. If I threw all of the rows at it at the same time, it timed out, right? It timed out about 7,000 rows written. And this is, once again, that very same problem. And now the question is, why? Why is it slow, and how do I fix it? What do I do? I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this should be performing much better. And this is a scenario I found myself in. I wrote some code, because I occasionally do, because once a developer, always a developer, right? You have a look at a problem and you don't see a particular solution to it, and then you just end up writing some code. And this is what I did. And I ran into this problem, and I had to start troubleshooting it, because I was working in a certain budget, and I couldn't just scale the database up, right? So how do I explain this? Number one, it's a difficult explanation, right? I can't hide behind that I'm just a developer. I'm kind of known as the SQL guy, and I've got to say, hey guys, the SQL database is too small. I can't optimize it more. So I started looking at it, because I went and I had a look at the performance metrics of the database, and I wasn't hitting any of them, but I was seeing terrible performance. And therefore, I needed a fix, and this is what we're talking about, right? So the big question is Azure SQL Database just slow? The answer is no. It's a fairly performant database. It performs really well. We just need to change how we look at things, how we do things. Okay, but let's have a look at some code. I've used Visual Studio, and you'll see some of the code. I'm just going to start this. Please, no comments about my my code, right? Like I've already used the excuse that I'm a SQL guy. The one thing that I did do was I used Windows Forms. I know that's a big no-no. I started with XAML, but it ended up taking me so long that I gave up, and I just went to pure old Forms. It made it a lot easier, right? So I just wanted to have some sort of test harness. And this is what I kind of came up with, right? So I've got a screen here, and all I wanted to do is give me inserts, right? So I hit that button, it generates 10,000 inserts, and it's just an insert statement, nothing smart about it. The table is really stupid. It's got one, it actually has 2 columns in it, so I can show you the table, so don't look at that yet. So if we have a look at this database, what you'll see is we have a table here, and this table only has 2 columns, right? So one is an identity field because I felt like it because this was really normal, and then the other one is just an invoice 1000 that just takes text. Excuse me. So this is all we have, and this is why the insert is really simplistic, and you'll see it just generates 10,000 of them. Right, and then I can hit the execute button, and the execute button takes this, and it just goes and it attempts to execute this against the database. I specifically didn't use a for each loop here. The for each loop on this would take about 15 minutes to do. Right, we're connected to the 10 DTU database in this test, and the principle is, all that's happening is I just want to work through this list, right? 10,000 inserts, that's what I want to do, right? So it's just it's an arbitrary number. Now, when we see performance and we see numbers here, so you'll see there's a time elapsed. This is not a benchmarking tool. I'm sitting at home writing code, I'm communicating to Azure. So there could be a lot of things that get into play here to influence this number. So this is not a benchmark. This is just an easy way for me to gauge some sort of performance level. And what you'll see here is I'm getting an execution timeout. Right? This is kind of, I was expecting this database. Well, I wasn't. The first time I did this, I definitely was not expecting this at all. Right? But now, if we have a look at how much of rows we have, you'll see that we actually managed to insert 7,348 rows in here. And that leads us to this problem. I now have data on my database that's inconsistent, right? So I'm missing 2,000 odd records in there, and this is a little bit of a problem. Now, the one thing that I did do is I truncate my table just for this test, right? So you'll see there's now 0 rows in it. I just do a select count. This just gives me essentially how many rows do I have in the table, right? And the previous command was just get rid of everything. Right, so that's what we did. We're going to say generate another 10,000 inserts. And one thing that we're going to change is right before this, I'm going to say begin transaction. And it's always very interesting when you do demos and when you do stuff, because we're sitting here like, damn it, begin what? Begin. And the one thing that I'm simply doing right now is you'll see on this block of code, I have begin transaction, and then at the end, I just have a commit, right? So I still have 10,000 rows I'm inserting. And one of the things I did was, you'll see that my text values are all GUIDs. So I generate the GUID every single time to make sure that there's no way that SQL could possibly cache anything, right? And I'm going to execute the same code again, right? 10 lines with just the transaction in it, right? I'm just going to hit the execute button, and then that's going to run. And we've gone from 7,348 rows in 30 seconds with a timeout down to 1 second. And let's just check and make sure that we actually have the rows in the table, right? And there we go. We've got 10,000 rows in there, and we got them in 1 second, right? So we could literally do this in code, right? So I can wrap what I have in a transaction. And the one thing that you got to remember, if you look at SQL, is everything is in a transaction. The first one was also in a transaction, but it was not a defined transaction like we had when I had the commit at the bottom, right? So commit tells SQL, hey, we're done. You can do this. You can write it in a solid block into the log, right? And that's the important bit here, that commit. And then at the beginning, we had the begin transaction, right? And this is the part that when it becomes important, right? Because now I can do bigger things. Now I can do better things. So we just went down from that to 1 second, right? And this is still a 10 DTU, unless it's not, and I made a mistake and it's 100 DTU, but you get the idea. It's still the same principle, right? What I wanted to do, though, was this is a very SQL view of it, right? So this is just me throwing all of this. Now, you could think, hey, I could just wrap all of these in a for each loop, and you can, right? That's the beauty of it. You could throw this in a for each loop, but then you'd run into a timing problem, right? So where this takes 15 minutes, I timed it. I can show you the sticky notes I made to take the timing off of this. So you'll get through this, you won't time out, but it's not a really good solution, because imagine a person sitting in front of this application and you're writing data down in this application. And what they get to is 15 minutes wait. I mean, I've been in this case where purely someone came in the morning, they clicked a button to run a report, and then they went off and they got coffee, and they were speaking to people, and then they got back to their desk and this report was done, right? And this one morning, this report was really crucial, right? So they got a phone call on the way to the office saying, hey, I need this as soon as you're in the office. First thing you have to do is run this report and send it to me. And they ran the report and they were sitting in front of the computer. And this report took 20 minutes, right? A call was logged, obviously, saying, hey, this report is running terribly. And what ends up happening at that point in time is you start looking at all of these metrics and then trying to figure out what went wrong. And the one thing that we figured out was nothing went wrong. It always runs 20 minutes. It's just, user perception. And that's always the pain of this, right? So if you're going to do a big insert, you need to kind of cater for that, right? But you also need to optimize for this. And what I did was I wrote some more code because this is a dev show, right? And what you'll see is I did this a little bit differently. So I can now select which server I want to connect to. So you'll see I've got a 10 DTU standard, I've got a 100 DTU standard, and then I've got Azure Synapse as well here, right? So we'll talk a little bit about Azure Synapse and some of the pitfalls, right? Because a lot of people move from writing code for SQL into writing code for Azure Synapse, and they attempt to do exactly the same thing. And I'll show you some of the kind of nightmares with that, right? So what we're just going to do is, this is 1,000 rows. So I can now select how many rows I want. So I've got 1,000, I've got 10,000, and I have 100,000 rows. This is start by 1,000 rows. And this is throwing it exactly the same way at the database like we did before. We're going to get after 30 seconds, we're going to get a wait, this should actually execute because it's only 1,000 rows, right? So there we go, it's 10 seconds. It's got 1,000 rows, and I can simply truncate the table and then get the row count again. It's back to 0. If I throw this up to 10,000, I'm going to get a timeout probably. And then 100,000, there's no way in heck that it's going to do this, right? I'll show you the code in a little bit with what I've done here. But now, the one thing that we could do is we could say, hey, remember when we did that transaction, right? I could still just do that, right? So I can just hit that execute command transaction, and we see it now goes down to 1 second as opposed to the 10 seconds that we have, right? Awesome. So if I switch this to 10,000 and I execute a transaction, it should execute in a fair amount of time, right? It's now off running, trying to do its thing. And there we go. It took 9 seconds, right? So if we do a row count, we'll see 11,000 rows. That makes sense. I just added 1,000. Now I added 10,000. And let's quickly switch to this 100 DTU one, right? Let's just get a row count. It has rows in it. I'm just going to truncate it. I'm going to get the row count again. So now we're on the 100. We're going to do 10,000, and I'm going to do, let's slap it in a transaction. And there we go, it's 1 second, right? So it's about equivalent to inserting 1,000 rows in a transaction, right, for the 10 DTU one. So it makes sense, 10 DTU to 100 DTU, this one's about, 10 times faster. It makes a little bit of sense. It isn't exactly like that. Like I said, this is a benchmark. Please don't see it as a benchmark. But we have other options, right? So we don't have to just do this execute command and transaction. So let's actually go have a look at the code. So if I have a look here, if I look at the transaction, this is the one we just ran, you'll see the first thing I do is I just get some timing information, right? So I reset my clock over this to measure it, right? So I go and I generate some records. So this just generates that insert statement for me that I want to execute, and then adds a GUID into it, right? And then I connect to my SQL database, and you'll see that this part here just allows me to switch between whichever database I want to communicate to, right? Then this is stock standard, just using a SQL connection. And then I am just doing a join. So I'm just joining all of the information that I got from this inserts. I'm joining it. I open my connection, and I say, hey, begin a transaction, right? That's all I do differently here, right? Is on the previous one, it just didn't have this step in it, right? So there's just no begin transaction and there's no commit there. So I just throw this at the SQL database normally. It would then essentially time out on 10,000 on 10 DTUs. But in this case, I've done a transaction, and this is what you just saw in the code, right? So it was a lot faster, a lot better, right? But this isn't good enough, right? So I'm just going to run this again, and I'll show you a couple of other methods that you could use, right? So the one thing that's important to understand when you're throwing information at a SQL database is how much of data do I need to send to the server? If I need to send 10 rows, then for the love of goodness, just execute it, right? You don't have to worry about it, right? When it gets to 10,000 or 1,000, we need to start thinking about it. So 1,000 rows, probably we want a transaction, right? If we jump up to 10,000, then we start looking at different ways. When I go to 100,000 rows, I need to think about it, right? So let's have a look. So we did, previously we did transaction. Now we're going to do a table value parameter, and I'll show you the code when this is done. Right, so let's just get this. This is 11,000. I'm going to truncate it just to keep it fair. We're on the 10 DT one because we restarted everything, and then I'm going to execute it with the table value parameter, right? And let's just do a row count. There's 1,000. I'm going to do the 10,000, and I'm going to press the button. It takes 1 second. We're going to get a row count. That's 11,000. So as you can see, it's factually inserted these rows in this amount of time, right? So now if I jump it up to 100,000 in my timeout, I'm not sure. Let's have a look. I'll keep you, hopefully occupied for the 30 seconds if it's going to time out with me talking. But this should typically complete, right? So what we've essentially done is we've just taken a little bit of a shortcut to SQL, and if it does time out, there's no error handling around this, so it'll just crash the whole application out, right? I remember to write the error handling around the execute, but nothing else has it. And now you'll see I just inserted 100,000 rows on a 10 DTU database in 19 seconds, right? So if I do a row count, you'll see it's 111,000 rows in there, right? Now if I jump this up to 100 DTU, and I just jump this back down to 10,000. Let's get that row count. Let's truncate the table, get the row count again at 0, and I'm just going to clear this, and then I'm going to execute it using the table variable, right? I'm going to do row count again. That's 10,000, and let's do the 100,000, and I'm going to click this, and this now takes it's really quick, right? No, it's not done yet. Sorry. Oh, there we go, 7 seconds to do that, right? So now we have 110,000 rows in this database. Really quick, really fast. You can't do this against Synapse. It'll just generate an error. So this is not something that we would want to do. So let's quickly have a look at that code, if I can find it, right? So that's giving it away with what I want to do next. So yeah, it's up here. It would have been easier just leaving the form open so I can click on it, right? And I'm not seeing it, which means I am quickly just going to move on and then just come back to this, right? So let's have a look at it. I'll show you the code for the table valued parameter in a second. I just want to close that. And then I am going to close this app here, right? And I'm just going to bring up the form so I can click on the button because I, for the life of me, can't remember where I headed away. So now you'll see this is a form, and I've got a form here. It'll open, and we can simply say here, this is what I want to show you. So I'm just going to get rid of that again. All right. So what we've done is you'll see here, the same kind of thing. I start my timer. I connect to SQL. I then create a data table, right? And this is where the biggest difference is. I now have a data table created in C#. I add that column that I want, so it's called text value, and then I create the records right here. So you'll just see I'm just adding a new GUID here, right? Nothing spectacular, nothing complicated. And then I generate a command, insert it into test table, text value, and then I do a select text value from this variable, right? And this variable is actually just a parameter that we're going to use, right? So in this parameter, what you'll see is actually a table, right? So it's a structure type, and the value is table, right? So that we created here. And then the type name to tell SQL is just a type that we set up in SQL. So we've got a test table type. So it knows what to expect from this, right? And I'm just executing this, and hopefully you're impressed with that time, right? Going from 17 seconds down to 1 second in some of the cases, right? But let's have a look at one more, which is bulk copy. So we're going to look at the bulk copy itself, and then I'm going to show you some Synapse stuff, and we're going to talk about Synapse as well in terms. So let's have a look here. I'll just bring that up. Now, what we want to do, we've got a 10DQ database. Let me just do this as well. So I'm going to do the table value parameter. I'm going to insert 10,000 rows. We're going to do it with table value parameter, and then we're going to do a bulk copy, and we'll see how it does at that point, right? So we're just going to remove all of the rows, get the row count 0, clear that, execute it with table value parameter. That takes 1 second, and now I can move to a SQL bulk copy, right? So if we get the row count, that's 10,000 as it should be. I execute this, and it's about the same time, right? So we can see the 10,000 rows really quick, really easy. But now we want to do that 100,000 against this 10DQ one, right? So we're going to hit the table value parameter. It's going to take a little bit of time. And if you paid attention to the code, what you'll see is I didn't put the timer over generating the rows. The timer is only placed over when it actually goes to SQL and executes for these rows, right? So it's going to take a little bit of time to do this 100,000 on a table value, 18 seconds. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'll just get the row count first. I'm going to truncate the table. So we just keep it, very fair. And then I'm going to execute the SQL bulk copy. And this is going to run off. It's now busy doing this bulk copy. And I'll show you the code for the bulk copy, right? And we'll talk a little bit about the bulk copy. We'll talk about the bulk copy as well in the PowerPoint presentation, because I want to show you some patterning where you get best of both. And there we go. You'll see that they stay very similar, right? So this is exactly the same. If we go above this number, then bulk copy will start outperforming the table value parameter typically, right? So bulk copy is when you have a lot of data, right? So let's switch this to the 100. Let's quickly just do this again. Table value parameter. It's going to run a lot faster than the 10DQ. All right, so this will go quick, and you'll see that I'm executing this on the main thread of the application. So there's no benefit, right? So 210,000, and then I'm going to do it with a bulk copy, and the bulk copy on 100,000 is going to take about 7 seconds as well. It's when we start going above this number, right? So there we go. We've just scored a second by going bulk copy. Now, when we look at this, you've got to look at the numbers that we're working with, and some of the caveats. And I'll speak about the caveats because it's important to understand the table value parameter versus this bulk copy. And I'll show you a little trick in a little bit of time with how we do that. But the cool thing now with the bulk copy open is I can switch to Synapse, right? So I've got 100 CDW Synapse. It's the smallest Synapse that you can have. I'll switch to that. I'll get row count. There's nothing in there. I'll just execute a bulk copy against it. And what you're going to see is this 100,000 rows on the smallest Azure Synapse that we have takes about 3 seconds, right? So it's fast. And then I'm going to tell you, bulk copying to Azure Synapse, which is the data warehouse, is the worst way of copying data to a data warehouse, right? It makes no sense. This is the way that we warn you not to do it. But as you can see, even using a bad way in Synapse, we beat that by half the time. Now, admittedly, this is 1,000 CDWs that we're testing against, but just to give you an idea. Right, so let's go have a look at that code again. Right, so let's just have a look at what we did differently for the bulk. I still have the form open, so I can just simply click on the bulk copy. And when we go here, you'll see all of the things almost exactly the same as we had them in the table variable. But what we've now done is we're using a bulk copy, right? And we're just pushing it into a table, right? We're doing a column mapping, so I'm telling it, hey, the table that I'm sending you, its column is equal to this column in the destination, right? So we have these two that need to match, and then I just simply do a write to server, right? This is really a quick, easy, hard way of throwing some stuff at SQL. And the idea here is I'm inserting data, right? So as you can see from the name, it says bulk insert, right? With table variable, one thing we could do is I can throw this into a stored procedure, right? So instead of just throwing this directly at table and doing this insert into, I could execute a stored procedure and send it this table value parameter, and then I could do an upsert in that, right? So I can literally just do a merge at that point in time. So I can do update and insert all at the same time. And this makes it a little bit easier. Here we're doing a pure insert, so we're not too concerned with anything, right? But let's have a look here, right? So I'm just going to move it on a little bit. So what about updates, right? So what if you want to do an update? And some of the same patterns can be used, right? You can do a transaction, you can do a table value parameter, and then you can use bulk insert, right? And I always find it funny when I talk about this and I say, hey, you use a bulk insert, because the principle is it's kind of, it says in the word bulk insert, right? So how are we going to do this update that we want to do is if I'm doing an insert, that doesn't make much sense to me, right? But let's have a look at merge quickly. So merge is in that sort of procedure that we would use, right? So this is the merge statement, and I would then send in this table variable in here, and I would simply do a merge against that table, right? So I'll go merge employees as target, and then I'll give it the stuff as my source, and then I'll have a look. If it's matched, then it'll be an update. If it's not matched, then we will do an insert of this data into that table, right? So this is not the test table that we used. I use a really simplistic test table, right? And let's now focus back to bulk insert, right? So this is a pattern I like using. The code isn't really neat at this moment because it didn't make sense for me to show you how to do a string concatenation using string builder as an example. So I left it in as a string concatenation right here. Please excuse me for that. But what I wanted to point out, what you'll see is this is using a bulk insert on that exact merge pattern. But what I do is you'll see the first step is I go and I create a temp table that looks exactly the same as my table, right? That I want to merge into. So I then, instead of using the table value parameter, what I then do is I create a temp table. I insert the data into that temp table. I bulk insert that temp table onto SQL, and you'll see there it is. So I'm bulk inserting this temp table. And then what I do is I go and I say merge the temp table to my real table, right? So if you're working with huge amounts of rows coming through, this is a really good pattern that I really enjoy using because it gives me a lot of flexibility. So it allows me to use bulk insert, but also to do a merge, right? So this command text here, it could have been in the sort procedure. It isn't necessary that it be in command text at all. But this just makes life a lot easier. And you'll see that I did remove some of the things here, right? Just to make it a little bit clear. But let me show you one last thing. I know that we are kind of dribbling on the time, but let me show you. I just wanted to point out the same kind of scenario in Azure Synapse, right? So what I've done beforehand is I created an external table. So this is a file sitting in Azure Blob storage. And I'm just creating an external table from them, right? So I have this available in Azure Synapse now, and you'll see I can do a select from it, and I probably shouldn't have done a star of it, but I'll get it back, and you'll see it's 144,000 rows, right? I'm just going to make sure I don't have a table that I've already created. Yep. So now I'm going to internalize this data. So I'm going to move it from blob storage into the Azure Synapse storage itself, so I can actually really work with it there. And this is the command just to do it, right? So create table. I'm moving 144,000 rows off of blob storage, and it took me 2 seconds to do that, right? So now if I do a count over that, you'll see that I've got about 100, for the love of goodness, can I just say this number, please? It's 144,000 rows in that table, right, in 2 seconds. And this is kind of the one of the ways of getting data into from a file into a database. Use Synapse as your intermediate point, maybe. So if you have a SQL database that you want to move this into, spin up a Azure SQL Azure Synapse data warehouse, a pool, execute this, and then just move it into SQL. Right, this makes it really, really, really easy to do. And that is about it for me. I just want to say that I had a look at some of the previous sessions, and I was a little intimidated with, there was one guy who did pixel art for everyone, and I was like, how do you compete with that? You know, he does pixel art. So a little intimidating, Rasmus.
So how do you compete with that, Morne?
I don't know. I couldn't get up with anything with how to compete with someone. I mean, I enjoy baking, right? So I bake cookies and cake. And I was, maybe I should, you know, invite people over for cookies. But then I realized we were sitting in COVID and there's no invite for cookies here whatsoever. I'll have them, right? I'll eat the cake.
So yeah, you eat the cake yourself, or post order a cake, so you can send to everyone, send a cookie, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I can tell you actually something funny and interesting. I never ever baked any cake or cookie in my life.
What?
So, and that is very true. So I cook to eat, but I never bake any cake or anything.
I enjoy
Just
baking.
eat the cake when somebody else baked it.
Yeah. I enjoy eating somebody else's baked cake or cookies. So
yeah.
Looking at you, Morne. So just saying.
Hey, you can ask Rasmus. I brought tart to the office, right? So
Yes.
you know, I do share.
I can confirm it.
Yeah. A side note, it also needs to be vegan. Just saying. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm very good in providing recipes for the others while not baking it. So.
Nice. That is good to know.
So talking about recipes, it could be that it should be 144,000 recipes in your table, right? So
it could be.
Go ahead.
One thing I forgot to point out, right, about this table that I could just quickly point out right now that I look at it. This table that I just inserted in 3 seconds is a much more complicated table than the one we've been working with, right? You'll actually see there's a lot more information. Just to point out this 2-second insert into Synapse, just, you know, interest sake.
Amazing. Yeah, and from a non-coder to a coder, I think it was good code, but who am I to tell?
Thank you, Rasmus. Yeah, I you know, you cringe a little bit when you're writing this code and you go like, how should I do this better, right? Am I going to get some flack for doing a concatenation this way, maybe? I mean, you know, coding standards and stuff. So you have to take that into account.
In the chat. So, but we have one question. So
Sure.
from Anas. So any ORM tools that does this for you, like Entity Framework?
So yeah, let's talk about Entity Framework. Entity Framework is actually really good. I worked with Entity Framework when it came out, when I was a developer, and it was interesting, right? Because at that point I was a SQL guy as well. I had a look at some of the code it generated, and I thought, really, maybe you guys just need to, you know, go have a look at how we really do SQL. I have to say that moving on from that, the rest of the Entity Framework is really amazing. So the stuff it generates is smart. It uses table variables, absolutely. It does it super smartly. So if you're using Entity Framework, absolutely. The one thing that you also need to think about is optimizing your database. So this is one thing I actually wanted to talk to developers about, right, as a SQL guy. You know, indexes. Right. As a person who has to fix these things up, what you occasionally get is the DBAs will say, "Hey, those are indexes. We can't touch them. The developer set them up." You speak to a developer, he goes, "Man, it's not like I really know. I just slap these things on because it looked good." The one cool feature we have in SQL Database, SQL Azure Database, is you can actually enable auto optimization, where we'll create these indexes for you. And a big part of that then switches into the entity framework itself. So the more queries you execute, the better your indexes will get, the better your performance will be. That's something I tested a lot, and that might be another topic for another day. With seeing that in action, that's really cool to see.
Yep.
But that's, takes it out of your hand.
We'll take you on the word. Thanks for the question, Anders, and thanks for answering, Morne.
Thank you very much.
So that was the questions. Everything, the rest was apparently very clear. So no more questions from the audience. And while we finish up here, you still have the question. You still have the chance to ask the question in the chat, so we can ask them to Morne if you have any. So Morne, anything that you want to send off the audience with in this regard? Anywhere that they should look for resources? Anything?
I mean, yeah, I normally just point to Microsoft.com, right? So just go have a look at the documentation. But it's always terrible to say that. I'll share my slides, and in there's a link to a white paper around performance optimization, like we just discussed here, how you should do it, what you should think about, and I'll add that in. But typically just use your favorite search engine like Bing to look for it, right? I know I can't help myself, but there's a lot of information, and you can always reach out to a lot of people. There's tons of people out there happy to help with performance optimization. It's really close to my heart, so I always try and help out if I can. But browse around, you'll find it.
Yeah, thanks, Morne. So Sherry, do you have anything to ask before we go to the wrap up?
No, not really. I just wanted to also mention that for this topic, I haven't looked at Microsoft Learn platform, to be honest. If I want to be very frank, it's been ages since I I needed to optimize any databases in my life. So, but I'm pretty sure that there should be a lot of kind of good content there about this topic as well. So check out the Microsoft Learn platform as well.
Yeah.
And yes, should we start wrapping up, Osmund?
Yeah, and we know you. We know what you're starting to talk about, right? So it's right.
Yes. So, so as a viewer of this show, you all are. I'm pretty sure you all learned something new today about Azure. So you can all go ahead and scan this QR code to get your Azure Heroes Learner badge. And if this is the very first time that you are getting this badge, you need to download an app by our partner Engine. And the reason for it is that all of these cute little badges, they are pretty unique for you, and they are based on Ethereum platform. And this app that you're downloading is your digital wallet, which you need to put a password. And I learned it in a hard way that password is very needed later on. So go ahead and download this. Actually get this badge. And the thing is that we just started this program, and we are going to have more and more use for these badges. Some of you might have received a message from the badger that you have a gift box. So that also can happen. This badger can later on turn into some actual physical swag as well. So yes, that is for the little badger. And we have different type of badgers. Learner is one of them. And if you want to know more about the program and all the different badger and nominate yourself or a community friend, go to aka.ms/azure.heroes. And we want to hear your feedback about this as well. And you can use the hashtag Azure Heroes and see how happy others are about this program.
And speaking about feedback.
Yes.
So we want your feedback. Morne also want your feedback. So how did Morne do? How did we do? And how is the Dev Show doing, right? So scan this QR code, go to the AKA link running in the bottom, and then put in your feedback in that form. You can also use the chat. You can also put your feedback on Twitter, etc. So there's numerous ways, but this is your show. We want your feedback, and we also want to know what we should have on the Dev Show. Morne just promised one more session, so we're looking forward to that. But we also want to know what do you want to see. So please give us your feedback.
And also, if you want to give a talk at our event, you can actually use the same feedback form and then let us know. And we also randomly choose one of you that who fill out the feedback form to actually to get some swags from us as well. I mean, DevShow is all about the developers and swag, so you can use that. You can put your information there as well. And the next stop is our upcoming event, Rasmus.
Yeah, so we started to build the 2021 agenda, and already now we have the next couple of months. So, but next week we have Christos, and he's gonna talk about the identity platform for developers, in the Microsoft family. So please make sure to join that one. It's gonna be very interesting. And if you want to see all the other shows that we already have scheduled, please go to aka.ms/devshow and see it on the meetup page. We will share some of them next time, but they are in there. So go and look at the full agenda there.
Yes, and the previous talk that we had on the 20th episode was around the IoT. So we know that there are some of you here that you're interested in this topic. And we have a global event at Microsoft. It happened on January 19th. It's all around our IoT, and it's going to happen in multiple different time zones. So you can go to this URL, which is listed here, and then choose your time zone and then register for the event there. We heard it from many of the, because we also have MakerShow as well. So we heard it from the people from that community as well. That is going to be a really interesting event. So you can sign up there. And on January 23rd, and this is it's a day for the Global Diversity CFP Day, and this is actually one of the conference which is very close to my heart. And last year we had it physically here in Denmark as well, but this year is going to be online. And this is for all the people that they feel like that they are coming from underrepresented groups, that they can join this event, and there will be a big community of people helping them to give their very first talk. So if you feel like that you belong to an underrepresented group and you want to be a public speaker, join this event. Last year we had one of our attendees that they joined to the event in Denmark, and she gave talk at Ignite in February. So you see, it works, and there will be a lot of people that they would like to help you.
And the URL is amazing, right? It's long URL, so there's also diversity in URLs.
Yes, and true, and then also share it with your other friends and colleagues and your network that you feel like that they want to do it, and we all know that it is not easy, but we can all do it together. And cloud secret seminars. We have an initiative in Denmark which is called Cloud Secrets, running by Azure user group. So Rasmus and we also were part of the Cloud Secret conference in early December, and now this is like a follow-up to that one. There will be 3 different sessions, seminar-like, in a sense that is like a deep dive and also included with some hands-on, and it's run by the Azure user group Denmark. So go ahead and check out the agenda. And if it is the topic that you want to learn, I really recommend you to register for the event as well. So, and
with that,
as
it's
we
I
are
think we have left to say sorry to left to say is thank you, Morne, for joining the Dev Show. Thanks for the great talk, and thanks everybody for tuning in. And see you next week.
Yeah, see you all next week. Bye bye.
Thank you very much. See you.